Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker, Casey, and today we are revisiting familiar territory, but exploring new elements of it by looking at how deeply some movements cover up their true intentions and slowly reveal the truth as their recruits fall further in. This is the last chance to be involved in the monthly memoir giveaway of Helen Zuman's book Mating in Captivity. And to be in with a chance of winning a copy, simply follow, like and comment on any of my social media content across November. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at CultVaultPod. If you have read Helen's work, please head over to Goodreads or Amazon to leave a review. Also, all of my patrons in the month of December will be offered a copy of this memoir. So if you are interested in getting a free copy of the book, but also in supporting the show, please head over to patreon.com/thecultvault or follow the link in the episode description. Patrons of all tiers will be offered a copy of the book with free postage, and you can become a patron from as little as £1 a month. I will also include some exclusive Cult Vault bookmarks. Also, there is a listener challenge coming in December. What is better than one episode of the Cult Vault each week? 2 episodes of the Cult Vault each week. Tell your friends, your loved ones, your dentist, your plumber, tell anyone who will listen to tune into the show, to subscribe and to leave reviews. If we can reach 300,000 downloads by New Year's Eve, I will release 2 episodes a week in the month of January. So not only can you grab a copy of Mating in Captivity by becoming a patron from as little as £1 a month, you can also get 2 episodes a week of the show for free just by spreading the word. Now let's get to the show. Here is Hayley to talk us through her experiences with the World Mission Society Church of God and a group we are already familiar with, Shincheonji. So hi Hayley and welcome to the show. Thank you for meeting with me today and agreeing to share your story. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
All right. Hi guys, my name's Hayley. I live in Texas and I'm a college student. I'm in my senior year right now, so I'm almost done. I study game design and animation, so I'm like a artsy person doing all these things, and that's about it.
Game design and animation, that sounds awesome. What sorts of things does that involve? Can you give us any sorts of ideas of games that you've helped work on, or things that we might be able to go and find?
Well, I haven't really I've made my own games for school projects and stuff, but I've never worked on anything really big. I'm just studying how to make games, and I mainly do the art, so I do a lot of digital painting and character design and concept art and that kind of thing. That's mostly what I've been doing and focusing on with school.
That's so interesting. I would have loved to have done something like that. What interested you in this field particularly?
Well, I've always loved video games, and I've always been a really artsy person. So I was like, well, I love doing art and I love video games, so I can combine them and hopefully make a living someday out of it if I'm lucky.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. Do you have a favorite video game?
Oh, goodness. There's so many. I think the one that I love the most and that inspires me the most is Silent Hill. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love survival horror games, are like my favorite genre. So yeah, that's that. And actually, I just saw this morning the new Resident Evil trailer, which didn't look that great, but it's still exciting because it's like it's supposed to be more as opposed to the film franchise that was released. It's supposed to be more in line with the first Resident Evil video game. So when you first walk around the corner and you see the first zombie and it's the first like scare of the game and you're like, oh, it had that bit in the trailer. So I was like, oh, that's quite cool. But yeah, that's great. The Silent Hill games are super creepy, but visually very different to most other games that existed at the time that they were released. So yeah, I can definitely see why that would interest you. That's so exciting. Yeah, I play a lot of video games when I have time, and it's something that I do enjoy myself. I did play one game once that really resonated with me. And if any of the listeners are into video games and have access to this one game, it takes about 2 hours to complete, but you should go and check it out. It's called Journey. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I think I have.
Oh, it's just one of the most beautiful games. It's visually amazing. The soundtrack is great, and it's I can't tell you what the game is about, because then that kind of gives away what is so special about it. But I don't know if it's only PlayStation you can play it on, but you must be able to play it on PC. But anyway, anybody that hasn't played that game and has access to a games console and the internet should go and download that game and play it. It's called Journey. It takes about 2 hours. You don't have to be interested in video games to enjoy it. I've not been approached by this company at all to advertise their game either. It's just something that I personally really enjoyed, and I feel like it's a great gateway into the gaming world for people that haven't had too much experience or exposure to games and are like, oh no, because I don't know all the buttons, or not being thrown into like a massive multiplayer online role-playing game or anything like that. So
right.
The name of that is Journey. Anybody that's interested should go and check that out. And if you do, I would love for you to get in touch with me and tell me how much you loved it, because it's got there's like this little thing that happens and it's like amazing. And when it happened with me, when I played the game, I was like to my partner, I was like, oh my goodness, look at this. And he was like, yes, that's what I wanted you to play it. So if anybody goes and plays it and has that experience, please email me and let me know. But anyways, we're not here to talk about games that we've played, as fascinating and as interesting as that is. We're here to talk about your experience with two different movements. Is that right?
Yes, I was involved first with the World Mission Society Church of God, and then after them I was involved with Shincheonji.
Right, and the World Mission Society Church of God is not something that I have come across personally. It's a bit of a mouthful as well, isn't it? Even if you shortened it to like to WMSCOG, it's still really long. So what can you tell us about this particular movement? Is it primarily American based, or even just like in the south of America?
So it is actually also a group from South Korea.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
And is this a movement that you were introduced to once you were older, or something you were involved in from a young age?
I was introduced to it when I started college. So it's pretty recent. I was a freshman, so just a couple of years ago.
Right, okay. And how did that happen? Was it because you were a student that you stumbled across this group?
Yeah, they're all over my campus. I've heard people from other campuses saying they're all over Texas. I know that they're all over the world, actually, but they, primarily go after students.
So how did you first come to know of this group? Did you hear of them before you met somebody? Were you approached by a group? Were they involved in any of your classes? Talk us through your first engagements with the World Mission, the Society Church of God.
Okay, so let's see. I think it was maybe a couple weeks after school had started. So I was brand new, freshman. I was just outside walking around campus, and this girl approached me, and she was like, "Oh, hi. What did she say? She was like, "Oh, are you a Christian? Can I read this Bible verse with you?" And that's kind of weird, but I'm like a really nice person. I never say no. So I was like, "Okay, sure." And so she read this verse. I don't remember which one it was, but it insinuated that God was a female. It was very strange, something I've never heard before. I've always been a Christian, but honestly, I was like a part of that family that only went to church on Christmas and Easter. So really, I didn't know that much. So that was really interesting to me, and I was really intrigued. And so she gave me her phone number and she invited me to a Bible study. And, I met with her and they were very upfront about everything. They were like, hey, we're a part of this group, the World Mission Society, Church of God. This is what we believe. They weren't secretive or anything. They were very open about it. And so I just went to the Bible studies once a week, and then I eventually went to the church.
And where were they taking their texts from? Did they have a traditional Bible that they were using in the study group?
Mm-hmm. It was just a plain, normal Bible.
And so it turns out there was nothing particularly geared towards women having a significant role within this church.
Well, it's weird because now when I read the Bible, I don't see it the way they showed it to me, but somewhere in the Bible it did insinuate that like there's a female version of God or something like that. And so a lot in the Bible they talk about like the holy city, New Jerusalem. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they mention that a lot in the Bible. And they basically believe that that phrase represents a woman. So like the female version of God. So they have God has like a male version and a female version, but yet they're one, but yet they're not. It's kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, they actually worship a woman and a man as the second coming.
Okay, and that must have been, as you said, kind of piqued your interest when you heard that, because that's not something that even me as somebody who doesn't have a particular alignment with any faith, I know that that's not something that is commonly taught or practiced in most Abrahamic religions and across sort of Christianity, and we can see that there's a lot around the empowerment of men, particularly in things like Judaism and with a lot of the Muslim based faiths. So I would have been also like, oh, that's not something that I've heard too much about. Come and tell me a bit more. So, and it's interesting now that if you pick up the Bible, you can't pinpoint particular parts that this group had interpreted in that way. So that itself is interesting as well, that they had very carefully chosen what parts they wanted to use that they could point at and say, now there's a double meaning to this, and that double meaning is actually that this represents a woman and a female, and that's the representation of women in this religious text. So
right,
I wonder if they then target a lot of student campuses, because there could be particular groups of people or particular age of people who are more likely to come on board if there seems to be progressive ideologies around the faith itself. You're
right.
You're a young independent woman. If you're not already going to a church, you might not want to go to one where women have to sit on one side and men have to sit on the other, and women aren't allowed to go up to the altar because that's a place that is reserved for men. So maybe that's a good in for a lot of the campuses that this group seem to be working on. I don't know if that's something that you've thought about at all.
I've never thought about that, but it definitely makes a lot of sense. Definitely. And how you mentioned how some churches keep the women and men separated and make women do different things and men do different things. This group kind of did that too, which is weird. Like when I went to the church, women sat on one side, men sat on one side, and women had to wear like a veil over our hair. I actually have it here if you want to see it because I kept it. This is what it looks like.
Oh my goodness.
And we would we only during like the worship services, and we would like just wear it like this throughout the entire worship service. And then once it was over, we could take it off. But yeah, like we had to wear this.
My goodness.
So I didn't even think of that.
For anyone that's listening that is wondering what this looks like, it kind of almost looks like a wedding veil.
Yes, it kind of does. Like
it's white.
It's really pretty.
It is pretty. Yeah, it's got those frills on the edges, and it's white to symbolize purity. And I believe that there is actually a verse in the Bible that does state that women should wear headdresses in certain situations. So this is a literal activity taken or a literal act taken from the Bible translated into those church services.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Thanks for showing us that as well. I do appreciate that. Does that particular item have a name if anybody wanted to go and have a look?
Oh goodness, I don't remember. I know they sold it at the church and I had to buy it.
How much did it cost?
I don't think it was very much. Maybe just like $10 or something. Not too much.
Okay.
I don't remember what it was called though. I think they just called it a veil.
So
I don't think there's a special name.
By the time you went to your first church service, had you been befriended by any other people, or was it just this one person you were doing Bible study with that you knew, so that when you arrived at the church, how familiar or unfamiliar are you with your surroundings, the people in the congregation, the order of service, all of that stuff?
So the girl who originally evangelized me, I was very close to her, because I was a new student. I really didn't have any friends. My family wasn't around, and I was really looking for that like kind of connection with people. And like, I just wanted that kind of belonging. So I was a great candidate for them. But I was really close to her. There was another girl I was really close with, and then two men who I was close with too, that would do the Bible studies with me. But I was the only new person that actually, like, there was another new person who studied with me, but he stopped coming very quickly. But so there was only maybe 4 people that I was really close to. And then when I went to it's an actual church building. It's like big and grand. And when I went there, I really didn't know anyone, but everyone was really friendly. And I noticed there was a lot of children there, like lots of children, like toddlers and babies and stuff. And something I really liked about the church was how diverse it was, because, growing up, my mom's white and my dad's black. So we either went to like the mainly black church or the mainly white church. And so just doing that, I didn't really like doing that, going to a church that's just not very diverse. And so this was the first church setting where it was really diverse, so many different kinds of people. And that was really welcoming. And that was something I really liked about it.
And do you feel like that is quite typical of people in Texas to have almost still segregation in some places?
I think kind of, mostly from the ones I've seen. Honestly, the only places that are more diverse are the culty places, which is sad, but that's kind of been my experience so far. I haven't gone to a ton of churches, but from what I've seen.
And so you go to this big fancy church building. This service is full of lots of people from different walks of life, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds, and they're all united by their belief in this one particular church and its beliefs. And it has a community feel. There's lots of children there. And this is a place you've walked into and feel like you could have an identity that is not just an all white church service or an all black church service. So it feels quite special for you.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And what does the first church service look like? How long does it last? What is the sort of the timetable of the service?
So I remember it was on Saturdays instead of Sundays. So we would go on Saturday, and I would sit next to my friend, the girl that evangelized me, and we would just like sing songs. They had like a songbook where we would sing from, and then the pastor would just read from the Bible and just start talking stuff. It was very similar to what traditional churches would do. Like there's a choir who'll sing and things like that. Nothing very, at least to me, nothing that stood out as really strange about the service in particular, just besides, men and women are separated and the women are all wearing veils.
What happens for you to, like, how long are you involved with this particular church before you end up becoming involved with the second movement, Shincheonji?
I was involved with the World Mission Society not too long, maybe about 4 months. And then I was cult free for maybe about 3 months before I met Shincheonji. So really, majority of my college life has been with cults.
And what do you know? Do they do any history around the World Mission Society when you go to these services? Do they tell you sort of how the movement was born, how it was founded, how it's developed, and how many people roughly are committed to the faith?
Well, it was founded in, I think, 1965. So it's actually
very
kind
new.
of old. It's older than Shincheonji. But they talk about the second coming, and they believe that Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God are one entity. And so they believe, when Jesus comes again, that there's going to be a female version and a male version. In the male version, his name was An Sang-hong. And so we really believed he was basically God. And then the female version, I don't remember her name, but An Sang-hong passed away in 1985, I think. And the woman is still alive. And that was kind of weird. I kind of didn't understand how God could pass away. I don't know. But I'm sure they had an explanation. I don't remember. But they said that they have so many churches around the world, and they told us that majority of Korean people are part of the World Mission Society. Now I know that's definitely not true, but that's what they would tell us. Yeah.
Yeah, especially because I don't believe in North Korea they could speak for that part of Korea at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is interesting. And so the World Mission Society really is almost like a cult of personality, because they do have figureheads that are in the flesh, or were in the flesh, alive, people that stand in front of you that you can communicate with face to face, as opposed to a deity that may or may not have ever existed in the flesh. So very much a cult of personality that has people that are worshipped.
Right. Yeah, we would even pray to An Sang-hong. Like we wouldn't even pray and say, "Dear God," we'd say, "Dear An Sang-hong." Like we would pray directly to him.
And it was he founded the religion in 1965.
Yeah, okay. He founded it. One thing I'd like to mention about them is that they really, when we first joined, they told us a lot about how they do a lot of community service, which they actually do. They're very involved in community service. And I remember the girl that evangelized me, she took a trip to Washington, D.C. because the government was actually giving a community service award to the World Mission Society for the work that they've done. And they even had like a plaque in the church that, Obama had given them an award recognizing them for their community service.
Sometimes with a lot of these religions that earn their tax exempt status with things like Scientology, a lot of that comes with the assumption. I mean, I'm not sure about this really, whether it is expected or assumed that the tax exempt status comes with charitable work. So there is an expectation, or I'm not sure if it's an expectation or it's actually something that's supposed to happen. The church uses that charitable status to give back somehow, whether it's through mission work. And so the World Mission Society have actually got accolades to their name, proving that they do go out and give back to society, give back to the community, and do a lot of good work.
Yes, they do a lot of community service. Yeah.
Okay, so you're only with this group for 4 months. What makes you decide to walk away?
Well, so the World Mission Society is very open about everything. They don't really lie to you like Shincheonji does. And so, I would be very open with what I was learning. And so I would just tell people about it, And so I live with my boyfriend, and I would tell him about it. And he was like, what the heck? That's weird. He thought it was very strange. But he just let me do it because, I seemed happy and I wasn't, doing really crazy things or anything, They just had weird beliefs that aren't very typical. But what specifically happened was they held an event at my university where we could invite people to come, and they were going to have a presentation explaining the church and explaining their community service and things like that. And so I brought him to it, and he was really freaked out. He was really, really freaked out. And so when we left, he was like, Haley, what is this? What is this? I don't know if I can join this with you, because I wanted him to join.
What was it that made him uncomfortable? Was it the separation of men and women? Was it you wearing the veil over your head? What do you think it was that really unsettled him?
Well, when we had this, meeting presentation with him, it wasn't like the service. So I wasn't wearing a veil or anything. It was pretty normal. What freaked him out the most was just the things they were saying weren't typical. And, they're talking about like the end of the world and things like this. And this man that sat next to him kept talking to him. And he was like, do you think all these natural disasters are a coincidence? And talking about all this stuff. And that freaked him out. And when we left, I think he was like the pastor. He was like, oh, can I take a picture of you guys? And can I get a video of you guys talking about how awesome your experience was today? And, I'll admit that was strange. And that really made him rethink everything. And was like, I don't know if you should be a part of this. So he did lots of research and kind of presented to me some things I didn't know that kind of made my decision to leave.
Taking somebody else along with an outside perspective who gets thrown into one of these services, as opposed to kind of the Bible study sessions before you go to the church service, and spending a lot of time with that one person that evangelized to you and building up that friendship and that safety, and then going to the first church service and having the love bombing and all of that stuff. It's a very different experience for your boyfriend to just come along with you and then be like, well, this is very strange, not really what I signed up for. I'm not comfortable with it, and you shouldn't be either. And then you think, oh, actually, maybe there is something to what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you decide to stop going to the church service, and you have around a 3-month break before you're introduced to this next movement. So talk us through then how that happened.
Okay. Oh my gosh, it's so much. Right. So when I decided to leave, I, you know, messaged the girl that originally evangelized me and I told her I don't think I can keep attending. And it was really sad because she was my first friend at college and just, giving up the friends that I made was really hard. But I knew that if, I tried to still be her friend, it'd be really hard for me to leave. So that happened. And then I had a 3-month break. Things were normal. And then I was introduced to Shincheonji. Oh my goodness. So it was around March, I think, around midterms. And I was just sitting outside on campus again. And this Korean guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey, are you Christian?" And I was like, yes. And he went on to tell me that he had a friend who's a professor and she's writing a book about Christianity and they're interviewing people because they want to put the most commonly asked questions about Christianity into the book. So they're interviewing students to see what their questions are so they can put it in the book, right? And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. But, at first I, see this Korean guy asking me about religion. I immediately assumed, is he a part of the World Mission Society? Is he trying to come and bring me back? And I just remember thinking to myself, like, no, we can't just assume he's a part of the World Mission Society because he's Korean. That's not right. I can't just assume that about him. And if he is a part of it, no one's forcing me to, do this. I can just leave if I want to. So I told him, I'd be willing to participate. So I gave him my phone number. And at that point, since I left the World Mission Society, I felt discarded, kind of like I had done something really bad. And, I don't have the right to call myself a Christian anymore. And God doesn't want me anymore because I was like worshiping this guy and, doing these things that aren't right. And, I just felt really like just bad about myself. And so him approaching me kind of felt like, oh, maybe I'm getting a second chance and I can kind of start over. So he texted me and we met up and, he brought the woman who was a professor. She really wasn't a professor. It was all a lie. The book was all a lie. Everything was a lie. But she interviewed me and, I talked to her and we kept meeting once a week and she was really, really nice. I mean, I love her. Like she really is like family to me, or I guess she was.
Yeah.
So we kept meeting and she started to do like just small lessons with me because I explained to her how I really didn't have that much knowledge on the Bible. And we started doing small lessons and the lessons weren't anything strange. I think they were just kind of your typical Christian things. Maybe some things here and there were maybe a little weird, but most of it was pretty normal. Just like the history of like Moses and Jesus and, normal things like that.
Right.
Yeah. And a couple months later, after doing that, she was like, "Oh, well, Haley, would you want to, continue studying?" And we were talking about the parables of the Bible. And she said, "How long do you think it would take you to learn all the parables in the Bible?" I said, "I don't know, 10 years or something, because the Bible's huge and it's confusing." And she was like, "What if I told you you could learn it in 8 months?" I thought that was amazing. I was like, wow, 8 months? That's crazy. How could you learn all the parables in the Bible in 8 months? And so she said, "Oh, well, my friend is hosting a Bible study because everyone's so interested in learning more. Would you like to join?" Of course, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll join. And she even she like brought out this paper that I had to sign saying like, "Oh, I agree that I will be going to this address on this day," which was really strange. But she said I had to sign it just because, they wanted proof of how many people were coming so they could prepare enough food and seats and all this stuff. I really don't know why they made me sign. It's kind of weird, but yeah, that's how I kind of began my Shincheonji journey.
Okay. So very soft Bible study sessions, very casual, looking at standard stuff that people who, like myself, again, have no faith-based ties would say, oh yeah, those are stories from the Bible that I've heard before. This is nothing new, no shocking revelations or strange beliefs that I've never come across before. And then the 8-month thing kind of really grabs your attention. You're like, yeah, wow, definitely 8 months, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm already studying for college, so I'm in the mindset of like, you know, jumping in and learning new things. So let's do this. So you're given the date and the time to go to this place, and what's your impression of that first group interaction?
It was honestly really good. I had a really great first impression of them. It was at someone's house because, you know, Shincheonji does not have churches. I mean, in Korea they do, but here they don't, you know. So we met at this lady's house, and she was Korean, and she was really, really nice. And it was me and maybe eight-ish people.
Okay.
And really only maybe like half of them were actually new people. The other one were the leaves that I'm sure you've heard about.
Yeah, right. So you get there, and there's yourself and 8 others in your group. So there's around about 9 of you in total, and it's your understanding that you are all brand new members, and this is like pretty much you all everybody in the room, it's their first time attending this Korean woman's house where you're about to have this group Bible study session.
Yeah, it was my impression that it was just a student organization or some kind of student Bible study group, and we were all new here except for the teacher. But yeah, that was my impression.
Okay, so what does that session look like? How long does it last, and what sorts of things are involved from start to finish?
So we get there. It was in the evening, maybe around like 6 o'clock or something, and we just kind of introduce ourselves and talk for a while. And we had a small Bible study session. The Bible study session itself wasn't very long, maybe like 30 minutes to an hour, but we stayed longer just like talking and, having snacks and just getting to know each other. And I remember the weirdest thing was when I was leaving, there was this guy who, he was actually new with me. He wasn't a leaf. He was actually a new member.
Right.
And we just, we were talking and we're leaving, and he was like, I feel really good about this. This seems like a really awesome thing. I'm really like excited. This excites me. I feel awesome about this. And I was like, yeah, I feel great about this too. And it's weird because that's something you would expect a leaf to say. Mm-hmm. But he genuinely wasn't a leaf. We graduated together, and he actually left before I left. But yeah, he was actually new like me. So it's just a coincidence that he just happened to love it.
So for anybody that's listening that hasn't tuned into any of the previous coverage that we've done of Shincheonji, which is often shortened to SCJ, can you just tell us what the leaves and the fruits are, and explain that for people that might be unsure?
Okay, so the leaves are members who have already graduated. They've already learned everything about Shincheonji. They're full on church congregation members. They know everything. And the fruit are the new members, the recruits, the people that are newly evangelized. So I was a fruit, and the leaves, they put the leaves in the groups, the new groups with the fruit, so the leaves will pose as new members. And they basically do that so they can kind of spy on the new members. And so they can, they try really hard to become friends with the new members, and they're always texting you, always wanting to hang out, things like that. And the thing that I think is the most manipulative about it is when, let's say I have a question or I'm feeling unsure about something, I say, this is strange, I don't understand this or that. well, all the leaves come and they're like, oh, but it's great. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, look, read this and this. Isn't that awesome? And so I have all these people telling me it's great. And I'm like, you're right. It is great. What was I thinking? You guys are right. If everyone thinks it's great, then I must not know what I'm talking about. I just need to study more.
Yep. And that is something we've talked about on the show a few times, the Solomon Asch conformity experiment, where people, I say this all the time, my listeners are like, Casey, talk about something new. You talk about the same things every episode. But it's because there's similar themes across all these different groups that we talk about. And I never know if there's anyone new listening. So I always like to just go over everything again. So the Solomon Asch experiment, I'm not sure if you've heard of it before.
I think I've heard you mention it because I've listened to some other episodes.
Yeah. And so there we go. I'm just like confirmation there that I just repeat myself all the time. So if everybody's opinion is that it's great and it's wonderful, and of, oh yeah, what you're having doubts, how are you having doubts? It's the best place I've ever been to. And then you're like, well, if everybody's saying that, then it must be me. Something must be wrong with me. So you're right when you say that firstly, it's manipulating because you are led to believe that everybody in that study group is new and having these first time experiences alongside you, when in fact half of them have already been through the course however many times, once, twice, 10 times. And then you're also right when you say it's manipulating that these people continue that pretense that they are new members, and as soon as they'll ask you questions about, are you enjoying it, why aren't you enjoying it, and then as you said, they kind of change the way you think and feel about things by pressuring you with their own ideas of you being wrong because it's great here and we shouldn't be doubting anything, and I'm going to come back next week and you should definitely come back next week, we'll come together, I'll pick you up on the way, or whatever it is that happens. So extremely, and that's one of the scariest things about this movement, is you just don't know then, and you to this day, I wonder if you have moments where you think about certain people that you interacted with and be like, well, so where now when I was involved, how long had they been there for? Were they actually new members, or how involved were they? Does that still happen from time to time?
I definitely would think about that. There's few people who would reveal how long they've actually been there, after I graduated and I was fully involved in everything. I definitely still think about it, and I was like, because there's some people who really just didn't mention it, and it's like, were they really new? Were they not? I don't know.
So you go to this first Bible study session. It has the desired effect, and you decide to keep going back. How many days a week? How many hours are you expected to give to the movement at this point?
So when you start the official lessons, it's about twice a week. Sometimes you'll meet with them more. That's because, they just want to hang out, or they want to, get tea with you or something like that. But for the actual lessons, it's about twice a week, but we would be there for pretty long time, around like 3 hours. we would be there for each day.
And that's how you're expected to learn all of this information in 8 months, is by giving so much of your free time to church-related activities.
Yeah, and they really make it feel not like church. They make it feel like you're just meeting with friends and you're having fun and all these things, because really in the beginning, it doesn't feel forced and it doesn't feel churchy. It feels more like you're just meeting with your friends because you guys are like in this club together, and you're, that's kind of more what they make it feel like in the beginning.
When you are learning these parables, are you tested on them at any point? Is there any kind of official systems in place to see how well you are progressing?
Yes, there are many tests that they have us do. I know for sure, they have like one that we would do after we have the beginner lessons, one after we finish the intermediate, and one after we finish the revelation. But they kind of, especially once you finish the revelation, you have tests very often. At least once a month, you have a big test.
So there's like 3 stages to this group, and then you have the big graduation ceremony.
Yes.
Where you become a fully fledged official member of Shincheonji.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long does the beginner section last for?
Trying to think. I think the beginner and intermediate combined is about 8 months.
Okay.
Not including the original, like them meeting with you for evangelism and stuff, that not counting that, but the actual beginner and intermediate lessons, I think, is about 8 months.
Okay, and by the time you get to the beginner course, are you told at this point that it's Shincheonji that you're practicing with, or is that information still withheld from you?
It's still withheld until you are at the revelation, until you start Actually, they even teach some of revelation without telling you. Yeah, actually, I think it's after they finish. It's very weird. They'll teach you revelation, and then they'll tell you, and then they'll teach you revelation again, but with the fulfillment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very sneaky still.
Yes.
and you go through the beginner and intermediate course. You then go into revelation. Are you told about the graduation ceremony? Is that something that you're striving for then when you're involved in this group? You're striving to get to that graduation ceremony, or is that something you're told about later on?
We're told about it later on. Even after they told us about them being Shincheonji, we didn't even know about any kind of graduation. I think really they didn't mention it until maybe a month or so before it was actually supposed to happen.
So how long does revelation last for?
I'm trying to remember. It's not as long as the other ones. Maybe just the first, before they tell you about, the promise pastor and everything, just kind of the initial, this is revelation, maybe like 2 months or something.
Okay.
And then after they tell you about the promise pastor, they go even more in depth, which takes like maybe another 2 to 3 months. And then even after you finish revelation, you never really finish revelation. You're always studying revelation.
When you go further and further through these courses and get more involved in the movement, are you expected to be donating any extra time at this point, or does it always stay at roughly sort of 6 to 8 hours a week?
As you get more involved, you are expected to spend more time. You're expected to, of course, come to both of the study sessions that they have twice a week, and they'll sometimes have events and things like that. But once you actually graduate, way more time is spent, way more time.
What happens if you can't make either of the study sessions in the week?
You have to do makeup sessions. I had to do that a lot because the times they had schedules did not work with my school schedule. So I'd have to come on different days and things like that. And I just have to do a makeup session with them.
Would you ever be contacted by a member asking sort of maybe why you're not present at certain study sessions?
Yes, we would always discuss my attendance before the session. If you don't attend in a session without telling anyone at all, you're kind of in trouble. So we would always talk about it beforehand. So like when school started back up, I'd give them my schedule and we'd plan everything out. And if something comes up, I have to tell them immediately. If something comes up and I can't come to the makeup session, I have to tell them and we'll figure it out. But it's really rare, actually, that someone just doesn't come and doesn't, text them beforehand or anything.
You mentioned something about the promised pastor, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? Talk us through what that means.
So the promised pastor, we have a lot of names for him. We call him the promised pastor. We call him Sangsangnim, which I think means teacher in Korean. Also the chairman, but his actual name is Lee Man-hee. And he's the figurehead of Shincheonji. He's we believe, I guess I used to believe, but he's the basically the second coming of Jesus. Kind of. They basically believe that when Jesus, returns second time, that he will be in the spiritual form. So he needs someone to speak on his behalf. So we believe that Jesus's spirit is with Sangsangnim, telling him everything he needs to do and everything like that.
So in that sense, then, quite similar to the first movement that you were involved in, the World Mission Society, in the sense that this is a male reincarnation of Jesus Christ, God the Savior, and another Korean man. So another cult of personality,
mm-hmm.
and the chairman who you are you supposed to pray for him at all, like you were in the first movement, encouraged to pray for the male leader of the World Mission Society, or was it different in that sense?
It was kind of different. So in the World Mission Society, we would pray to An Sang-hong as if he actually was God. But with Shincheonji, we're not supposed to call the chairman God, anything like that. Like that's bad. He's not God. He's not Jesus. We would pray for him. Like if he's, because he's 90, I think right now. So, if he's having health problems or something like that, we'll pray for him, but never pray to him. We always pray to God.
Right. And Lee Man-hee, you said he's the founder of this particular religious movement. Do they do with Shincheonji what they did with the World Mission Society and have sort of history lessons where they tell you the birth of the religion and how it moved throughout Korea and the rest of the world?
Yes, very, very in depth. So every single chapter of Revelation, well, they believe that Revelation's been fulfilled, I think up to 18-ish. I think that's about somewhere around there, the chapter that we're at right now. And so every single verse and every single chapter has an explanation of how it actually fulfilled on earth. So there's a massive history that we go really in depth on about the physical fulfillment and how everything happened. And we never stop studying that. Even after we graduate, we study it constantly.
You've gone through the beginner and intermediate courses. You've started Revelation. You've gone through that, even though it never really ends. There is an official end to the course, but it carries on afterwards. So then you're sat down and it's explained to you that actually what you've been involved in for the past year or so is actually SCJ. How is that? How does that event happen? And when it does happen, is it also interlinked with the leaves coming forward and telling you that they've actually been involved with the church for a long time and they didn't start when you started?
So the leaves never really come forward and say anything. If you ask, they'll probably mention it, but a lot of it is like, we kind of figure it out as we go. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why you know all this stuff and all these things. Yeah, it was really crazy how it happened. I remember the Tingjang name. She's the head instructor for the North Texas Center that I was attending. And she sat me down with this one other girl who was new like me. And she was going to reveal to us the truth. And we were both super excited because they hyped it up. And we were like, we're ready to know. And I remember she said, she had like a trick kind of question for us. She was like, we are Jehovah's Witness. And I was like, what? You're Jehovah's Witness? Really? And she was like, that was just a test. She was like, I needed to see that you would believe in anything. even if it was Jehovah's Witness. And if you're willing to believe that, then you're ready to know the truth.
Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So obviously she has such a negative perception of Jehovah's Witnesses that she used them as an example, and if you weren't scared off by her declaring that you'd actually been part of the Jehovah's Witnesses, she thought that you'd be fine with it being SCJ.
Right.
That's so bizarre. That really gives you some insight into the us versus their mindset that these groups have, because she obviously has such a level of disinterest or disdain or negativity about any other religious group that isn't her religious group.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so she's like, okay, if you're willing to believe that, you're willing to believe anything. So
yes,
what happens
exactly.
next?
So she said, okay, you passed. I can tell you now. And, she told us that, the second coming of Jesus is here. She was like, can you guess where he's from? So we were guessing all these countries, and, she was like, you have to be okay with it being anyone, because it could be anyone. And at first, I don't know why, but I was like, is it going to be Donald Trump or something? I was going to freak out. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like, if it could be really anyone, what do I do? Because she's making it seem like it's someone I know or someone that I wouldn't want to follow or something like that. So it's very weird. But the only thing I was thinking in my head was, please don't let it be South Korea, because my previous group was from South Korea. And I knew that if this group is from South Korea, that would be very conflicting for me, and that it would be very hard for me. So I was just like begging it not to be. But then she said, it's in South Korea. And I was like, okay. That was, I didn't want to hear that.
But also, like, of course it is. Of course, of all places, it's South Korea.
Exactly.
And how insulting is it to you for her to say, I just needed to know that you'd believe in anything? That is like, it's an insult to your independent thought. It's an insult to you as an individual, for her to admit that she's trying to manipulate you. I'm just gonna, I just needed to know, and you've passed my test. And then she says you have to be open to it being anybody. They could be from anywhere. So there's obviously that sentence itself has connotations of, traditionally, in Abrahamic religions, in Christianity and Catholicism, or whichever umbrella or branch or sect or name you want to use, God, Jesus, the Holy Ghost, the Trinity, none of those things traditionally point at that person being of Korean descent.
Right. So
I guess that is what she was trying to get across when she said it could be anyone. You have to be open to it being anybody. It could be anybody. I mean, that's my perception of that. Is that, would you say that was your take, or did you interpret that differently?
I don't know. It was just all strange. Like, she was really making it seem like it's someone controversial. And that's why I was kind of worried, like, is it like Kim Kardashian or Kanye West? Like, I don't know. Like, she's making it seem like it's really someone I would know of. I think the reason she did that is because in Korea, Shincheonji is really, really hated in Korea. And so, in America, it's not as big here, but, maybe she wanted to just make sure, in case we have heard of it, and have heard some of the negative things people say about it, that we'd still be willing to accept it.
Right. Okay. That I suppose brings some clarity as to why they feel the need to be so manipulative and so secretive about their processes with recruitment and slow thought reform for members in the group, and the coercive tools of having the self-policing system of the leaves and the fruits and all these things that they have in place. perhaps the hatred amongst South Koreans towards SCJ goes a little bit of a way to explain why that is. It's just so strange to me that they have such manipulative tools.
Yes.
and yet, like, they're not what I would consider a particularly big branch of Christianity. They're still a very small group in comparison to some of these other bigger movements like the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormon Church, for example. So you have this revealed to you. What are your thoughts and reactions? Say, like, oh, I've never heard of Shincheonji, or how does that go?
I was honestly kind of disappointed because, like I said, I didn't want it to be from South Korea because that, I had a previous experience. So I asked her, I said, well, my previous group was also from South Korea. So why this one too? Why South Korea? Why is this happening? And her explanation was, well, if, the second coming of Jesus is in South Korea, what do you think Satan's going to do? Satan doesn't want people to, come to the true church of God. He wants to make you guys go away. So he's going to put all the false messiahs in South Korea too, to confuse you guys, to confuse the whole world, so you won't know, or so you'll avoid South Korea because all these false people are there, just to cause chaos and confusion. And like, I guess logically, yeah, that makes sense, right? That seems like something Satan would do, but that was her reasoning. And, to me, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And if the World Mission Society at this point are not being secretive like Shincheonji, they're not hiding their identity, they're very much open with people, they're from the start, then Shincheonji are very much aware that the World Mission Society exists, that they also originate from South Korea. They were actually there before Shincheonji existed. And they are also evangelizing on college campuses and recruiting similar people into their movement. So it gives Shincheonji a very good basis to come up with answers to the types of questions that you might be asking at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
And what happens from this point onwards? You are then told about this graduation ceremony. Is that something that is then revealed to you?
I don't remember exactly when the graduation was revealed to us. I know it wasn't. They revealed it maybe a month or so before the actual graduation happened. It was weird. It was really weird. At first they said, oh, we'll have the graduation and all you have to do is pass this test. And once we pass the test, we sign the book of life and fill out this form full of information that has our email and our birthday and our blood type. And some people, I don't remember if they asked for our social security number or not, but I know I did not put my social security number because I know for sure I didn't have it memorized. And that's just weird. I don't remember if they asked us. I've read, some other people say that they have been asked. I really don't remember if they did that for us, but we had that kind of mini graduation ceremony at the center here. And then later on, they were like, oh, we're going to have a bigger graduation ceremony in Houston. And so the Texas head Shincheonji Center is in Houston. So we all got on a van and went to Houston, and we stayed there for a night. And they actually rented the auditorium out at a big university, and we actually held a graduation there.
And how many people roughly attended this in terms of the overall number, and also the number of people graduating on that day?
Worldwide, they said it was 300,000. I think that number is exaggerated. I do not think it was actually 300,000 people. But as far as just our ceremony we had here, Mm, it was quite a bit of people. I'd say maybe like between 100 and 150 people.
Okay, okay. And are
But a
you
lot of them,
encouraged to bring family and friends along and tell them about this ceremony that you're going to, or is that something that you're kind of told not to do, perhaps?
oh no, we tell no one. Super, super duper secretive. They even set us down to help us make excuses to tell our parents as to why we had to go off to Houston for the weekend.
Right. So, oh, that's really interesting. So they've been so secretive during your recruitment and introduction and slow indoctrination into this group. And then once you're on board, you're also then encouraged to adopt those same traits into your everyday life about the secrecy and keeping Shincheonji's identity hidden away from what how was that put to you? Why were you told to keep that to yourself?
Well, the main reason was because they say that, you know, this needs to be revealed to people slowly, just how it was revealed to us slowly. And they're like, remember how you felt in the beginning? And it was like so amazing. And like that whole process is necessary for you to grow and for you to, be a part of this church. It's necessary, or else, things may go wrong and then you could fall away. And once you fall away, there's no coming back. And, so we were told the whole process was necessary. So if someone especially found out about the fulfillment before they could go through that process, it was almost guaranteed that, they would spiritually die. And, of course, we don't want to kill our family or our friends and stuff like that. So we kept it secret.
So it's put to you that you are protecting your family and friends by not telling them that you're involved in SCJ.
Yes.
Okay. And then that is very similar to what one of the previous guests said about their experience with SCJ when it was revealed to them that they had been surrounded the entire time by people that have always been involved in the church but pretended that they were new like them, that it was done to protect the new people. It was done, we didn't want to scare you, we did it for you, we concealed our true identities for your benefit. So there seems to be a very reoccurring theme of that in SCJ as well, which is quite interesting.
Definitely.
So you have this big graduation ceremony, which is not something that we've spoken about too much before in the previous episodes. I know that some people we've spoken to didn't get as far as the graduation ceremony, decided to dip out before it got to that point. But you mentioned that after your ceremony, the time expected from you to donate to the church then increases.
Yes.
So
it increased a lot.
It increased, right? Okay, so talk us through then that process. What happens to you and your relationship with this movement from graduation onwards?
So after we graduate, there's so much. So I graduated, I think it was fall of 2019. So it was about 2 years ago. So it's been a while. And after that, so we would attend the worship services, which is twice a week on Wednesdays and Sundays. And the worship services themselves are about 2 hours. And then afterwards, we would have a cell meeting with our cell group where we would discuss the worship and show our notes and things like that. And that would be about 1 hour. And then they would have, they'd have like morning prayer, which was about 4 days a week. And then we would also have extra revelation training, which when COVID started, they had that every single day that we were expected to attend. They would also have evangelism events where they would teach us how to evangelize. And yeah, we would do that. And then they would also have mindset training too, where the the group in Houston would host it. And so we would meet with like all the Houston people, and we'd all be on Zoom together doing the mindset training, which is, I guess, to train our mindsets on how we should be thinking and stuff. Yes, it was a lot that was expected of us to spend.
And did any of your friends, families, or your partners at this point, did any of them ever question like what you were doing with all your spare time, why you were so busy, and why you couldn't be with other people a lot of the time?
Yeah, I really kept it hidden. I was actually living a double life at that time. It was really crazy, but I kept it super hidden. Really, no one knew. My parents didn't really know. They're like, oh, okay, she's doing a Bible study. Cool. Like if people ask what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I'm doing my Bible study. Or I'd say, oh, I'm meeting with a group of my friends on campus or something like that. The only person who really saw how much time I spent was my boyfriend, because I live with him. And so he would always be like, you spent a lot of time with him. But I seemed happy doing what I was doing. So he was okay with it because I seemed like I was happy. So he was like, if you're happy doing it, then, do whatever you got to do.
And at this point, are you just kind of brushing it off as Bible study because you are following SCJ's direction on not revealing too much of the truth, or are you keeping that information close to yourself because you're worried about how other people might view your involvement with SCJ?
I said it was a Bible study because Shincheonji told me to. Yeah, we're not allowed to say anything about it or reveal it to anyone at all.
You mentioned in your emails to me something that you wanted to talk about specifically that also wasn't mentioned in other episodes, and that was how you went out with Shincheonji to go and was it protest for the chairman of SCJ
this was when COVID happened. We were sending like messages and emails to, okay, let me explain what happened. It was crazy. So the chairman, he got in some legal trouble. One, because he was something to do with money laundering, like a lot of money. I think they said like 1 billion won or something like that. And then also when COVID happened, Shincheonji basically just caused a mass spread of COVID in South Korea. I think it was the 31st infected person was a Shincheonji person. And from them, it just exploded. And so the government, came to the Promise Pastor and said, listen, we need a list of every single, and like a list of all the names of the people who are part of the church, because we need to like contain this virus. And so he didn't cooperate. He, didn't give it to them in a timely manner. And then he also didn't give them all the names. And so, with COVID, it's a very timely thing. You have to act quick. And so they got him in trouble for that. And, we were told that, he's an old man. He can't be in prison. They're violating his human rights. So we were tasked with doing mass amounts of research to find every single human rights activist or influential person literally in the world that would maybe be able to do something. And so for my center in North Texas, they gave us a list of a bunch of organizations, universities, and we were each assigned with finding people, a part of those organizations and universities, finding their emails, finding their Twitter accounts, their Facebook accounts, their Instagram accounts. And then we would post them all. And then we all wrote essays that we would then be checked by the Tingjangnim to see if they were good. And we would talk about why they need to help Sangsangnim. And we sent them out to all the emails, all the social media. And like, it's not like one person would send it to one other person. It would be like maybe like hundreds, maybe even thousands of people sending all these messages to like this one person to their email and all of their social medias. So we did this for so many people.
So it's like activism really inside the church at that point.
Yeah, because, we were like, Promise Pastor's 90, he shouldn't be in prison. And we were freaking out thinking our Promise Pastor's going to go to prison. And so everyone did all that they could to reach out to everybody that we could think of.
And at this point, then, is your identity as an SCJ member revealed to family and friends, or is it still something you manage to keep hidden from them, despite going out and having this very public opinion about Lee Man-hee being imprisoned?
It's still very secret. We were told to, if we needed to make fake emails or make fake accounts, to just do it. Or if we could use our real accounts with just, private messaging or something, then to do that. But to still keep it very, very hidden from our family and everyone.
And reflecting on it now that you have moved away from SCJ, do you realise that Lee Man-hee probably should have been in prison for what he did? Or do you still think that given his age and status and level of criminal activity, or I don't know if criminals that, what is it? It's difficult. What are your thoughts on that now, that situation?
I have mixed feelings about it because honestly, I've only been gone from Shincheonji for about a month and a half, and I don't know. I feel like I still kind of have some empathy for him, but I do think that, especially regarding the, COVID scandal, that was not okay. That should have been handled way differently. And I think he actually ended up not getting in trouble for the whole COVID thing, but he did get in trouble for the money laundering. And I believe he was in prison for about 6 months.
Yeah, the money laundering side of things, if it's proven, absolutely criminal activity. The COVID thing, I don't know if he was solely responsible for the congregations in Korea or people still flying over and attending the particular church where the mass spread happened. I don't know if he was present there. I don't know if he advocated for it. I don't know if he just got into trouble for it because he is the chairman of the church and so was responsible for providing all of that personal information for followers of the church. I'm not sure. However, obviously money laundering, definitely something that over in England anyway, you would get into a lot of legal trouble for. So that answers that question on what I posed to myself before on whether he was a criminal or not. So you said you've only been out for a month and a half. So you were involved with SCJ for around about 2 years.
Yes, around, 2.5 years if you count when we first met. Yeah.
What happened for you to eventually realize that what you were a part of, very similar to the World Mission Society in some ways, not a group that you particularly want to remain a part of? What happens?
Oh goodness, I feel like so much happened. It was a pretty gradual process, I think, because I was extremely devoted, so devoted. Like this time a year ago, so devoted. I never would have thought I would have left. But just some things that they would do or say really bothered me. They never caused me to leave, but they like kind of planted that seed of doubt in me that was like, I don't like this that they're saying, or I don't like this that they're doing. Like, for example, they require us to tithe, which is to, give money. And I understand that to an extent, but the majority of us are college students, and like we're not rich, and some of us have jobs, but like a lot of people leave their jobs for Shincheonji, so we can't just be giving our money to them, and they were very adamant on us giving money to them. And I remember I didn't tithe. I would never tithe. I mean, only tithe like a couple times, and I'd only give like $5. But we got a new Tingjang name because our previous one had gotten pregnant and she couldn't, teach anymore or as much. So we got a new one, and she was very hard on us about tithing. And, we weren't tithing like we were supposed to. And she held like a meeting, and she was just like yelling at us, telling us like, don't you want to help build God's kingdom? Like, you have to help us. I donate between $500 and $1,000 every single month. So, and I work full time for Shincheonji. So if I can do that, then you guys can at least donate something, because, how do you expect us to build God's kingdom if we don't have money to do so, and all this stuff? And that just bothered me, because I feel like people's financial situation, that's private. And if they can donate, then that's nice. But like, if they can't, then they just can't. And like, that's their business, and you shouldn't force them to. So that really bothered me. That was like the first seed of doubt that was planted in me.
That is a very good subject for me to kind of navigate back to something we were talking about earlier. And that was around churches having the tax-free, the tax exemption status, and whether they are enforced or expected to give back to the community in some way. So I did a little bit of research quickly, and donations and tithe that are given to churches are mostly used for the upkeep of buildings and evangelizing. There is an expectation that churches will give back to the community in some way, but it's not something that's enforced under the tax exemption status. However, charities with the IRS are expected to complete a 990 form that explains their expenses and what they're spending their money on. So if I donate to a charity, I can then go on the charity's website or go and visit the HMRC Revenue and Customs website over here, which is like the people that we have to submit our taxes to. And I can see exactly what that charity has spent money on, how much they've been given in donations, and all of that good stuff. Churches don't have to complete one of those 990 forms. So in 2014, I found a figure that says that there was $114 billion given to churches that was declared by the church. Well, by the church as in overall. There was $114 billion donated that was declared, but then no one has to come forward and say what that money has been spent on. So when the World Mission Society is earning awards for giving back to the community, then there is obviously a lot of evidence that they are submitting on how they are using their donations to give back. I'm not sure how much Shincheonji have ever come forward and said this is how much we've been given in donations and this is what we've spent it on. Perhaps we'll never know. But I did just want to go back and let the listeners know that now we have the answer to that question that I also posed to myself earlier on in the episode, and kind of felt like an idiot because I didn't know the answer to my own question. But now we know, so that's all good. So you start to get a little bit uneasy with some of the more forceful ways of thinking and behaving that Shincheonji are putting forward, especially with things like tithe. Mm-hmm. And so you have a few doubts. And do they start to increase and build? Once you've got that little seed of doubt there, it just grows and grows, and you have more and more thoughts about, well, if that's the case with this, then maybe that's the case with that. And is that kind of how that starts to happen?
I'd say yes, very slowly, but yeah, especially when just so many things is put on each other and just they kind of just build up, especially when they were requiring us to do revelation training every single day. plus, the morning prayer, plus the, worship service, and plus we had to evangelize. And I just was like, dang, this is a lot. And I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. I would only do the worship service. At first I tried to do the revelation, but it was too much. And I was like, I can't do this. So I just stopped. And I did not participate in all the things that they wanted me to, because I felt like it was unnecessary. And they were like, one time I had a procedure done and I was in a lot of pain. And I told them, and I was like, hey, I don't know if I can like have my camera on during worship, because like I'm in the bed, I'm like crying and I'm hurting, and I can like still listen and follow along and take notes. And they were not okay with that. They were like, no, you have to wear your nice clothes. You have to be sitting upright. You have to have your camera on. That made me so upset. And I just said, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I just listened with my headphones, had my camera off. I just did that, even though they told me not to. I just did it anyways. Because I told them, I was like, I mean, at least I'm trying. Like, I'm doing something. I'm trying, at least I didn't say I can't do it. That bothered me a lot.
Especially when you're already given so much time and so much of yourself to the church, and you've been through this experience, and you're obviously in discomfort, and you want to attend the sessions online, and when you're asking for a little bit of leeway, because you're under a special set of circumstances at that particular point, when the leadership is not sympathetic to your cause whatsoever, that's got to be quite hurtful. That's got to make you feel like you're not respected as an individual in the church whatsoever, because nobody is saying, oh, actually, do you know what? We should make an allowance for Hayley this week because of this. She's come forward and said she still wants to attend the service, but we're just going to disregard all of that because she should be attending in exactly the same way everybody else is, even though she's like bedbound.
Exactly. Yeah. I hated that.
So what happens for you to finally go to the leadership and say, oh, that's it, I'm not attending anymore?
So okay, so basically what happened was, I have all these like doubts and just these worries and things, and I was just praying really hard, and I was like, God, please help me. Like, am I supposed to be here? Is this what you want out of me? I'm spending so much time on this. I want to make sure this is worth it. I was just praying really hard about it. And so I was listening to like a murder podcast, and they mentioned the Moonies. And I was like, who are the Moonies? I've never heard of the Moonies before. And it sounded so similar. And I was like, what the heck? Why do they sound so similar? This is weird. How is this cult group similar to my group? We're not a cult. And so, Shincheonji says, don't research Shincheonji at all. Of course. I was like, well, I'm not researching Shincheonji. I'm researching the Moonies. That's not against the rules. So I researched the Moonies, and then, from the Moonies, I found like other cult groups, and, specifically like cult groups from South Korea. And there's this one group, I don't remember their name, but they said something that was word for word something that Shincheonji says. And it was, fulfillment related. And our whole thing is that we're the only ones with the fulfillment. We're the only ones with this word, the only ones with this truth. So if another place is saying the exact same thing, especially about fulfillment, like, how do they know about it? That doesn't make any sense. That's our thing. They can't know about it. That really freaked me out.
And I think the Unification Church was formed in 1954, which would make it the original South Korean movement with this particular piece of prophecy around fulfillment. So I mean, who did it first? Then you've got to be thinking, well, maybe SCJ aren't as original as they are claiming to be.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. And at that point, I was still fully like in it though. And I was like, no, Haley, you can't think these thoughts. We're poisoning ourselves right now. We can't be thinking this. This is bad. And I use Reddit a lot. And so I was like, maybe there's like a Shincheonji group on Reddit where we can like, maybe like where they post like verses and we can like talk to each other and like support each other. Maybe they'll have some like supporting words for me to get these thoughts out of my head.
Oh.
And so I went to the Shincheonji subreddit thinking it was
Full of people still involved in the chat.
Yes, because it was just called Shincheonji. So I was like, yes, I found it. Maybe they have like some good resources here for me. And I was looking, I was like, this is not for Shincheonji people. This is for ex-Shincheonji people. And at that point, I had already seen too much and I was like really doubting. And I put my phone away. I was like, no, we can't look at this. But I just kept thinking about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, is it really? I don't know. And, they mentioned gaslighting in the subreddit, and I really didn't know what that meant. So I did research on what that meant. And I was like, am I being gaslighted? Like, yeah, that's basically how it happened.
It must be so bizarre to be involved in a group to then hear about another group that sounds similar, especially one like the Moonies and the Unification Church, because there's been so much written about this particular movement and their extreme cult-like methods of control. So it must be so strange to be involved in a group that you feel is completely innocent, platonic, right in what they believe in, and the correct in their principles, and the only true faith that you should be involved in. For then to hear about a group that's so similar but then is outwardly labeled by most people as a cult, especially during the 90s when all of the news articles were coming out about the Moonies actually, and all of these articles were just outwardly labeling the Unification Church as a cult and talking all about family separation, which Miriam described in the previous episode that I released recently. I can't even like wrap my mind around how that must be for you to sit there and be like, oh my goodness, have SCJ changed their name in the past? Because this sounds like the same thing, but it's not the same thing. It must have been such a strange thing to happen.
It was so weird because Shincheonji tells us that any group that is not Shincheonji is a cult. Every other group is a cult except for Shincheonji. So, the Unification Church, that's not Shincheonji. So Shincheonji people would say it's a cult, even though they say things that are so similar. And that was just messing with my brain so much. And that's really what just really did it for me.
But in the same breath, the Unification Church would probably say exactly the same thing. We are the only true faith, right. and anybody else outside of this movement is wrong, and you shouldn't associate yourself with them. There's a lot in the Unification Church about, how you will, you're going to fall if you get involved with worldly people outside the church and all that stuff. So, that is particularly not very unique to SCJ, saying, I'm pretty sure that most Christian sects claim that anybody else outside of Christianity is involved in a cult. So I mean, that is a topic that I could talk about all day, trying to wrap my mind around that. So you sent me some pictures, some screenshots of a text conversation that you had, and it's you basically saying, like, here it says, "Hey girl, I've been thinking about you since we talked on Tuesday. I'm just curious, what made you want to leave?" So you've gone to everybody and said, like, I'm leaving. This is not something I'm going to do anymore.
Well, actually, originally I had when I decided I wanted to leave, I didn't tell anyone.
Okay.
I blocked all of their phone numbers, deleted them from every social media, and I turned off notifications on Telegram, and I was like, I'm just gonna quietly leave because I didn't want them to come after me. I was genuinely afraid that they would really, I really believed that if they tried really hard, they could convince me to come back, and I didn't want to take that chance. So I didn't tell anyone. And so about 2 weeks after that, I was missing worship service and everything and not responding to Telegram. And I was just at my job, just working normal. I work at my university and I work in just like this office area. It's not really accessible to students. Students don't just walk in there, but 3 girls from Shincheonji just walked in and just came at me.
Okay, so what the exact interactions that you were worried about have now happened?
Yes, and they didn't give me any indication at all. I checked my phone and no one even messaged me asking why I wasn't attending or anything. No one said anything, like a normal friend would be like, hey, are you okay? I haven't seen you, No, they didn't do that. They just appeared at my job and, they brought me my favorite boba tea from my favorite place. And it was the exact order I always get. And they brought it and it was my cell leader. It was, and then 2 girls that I graduated with. One of them lives, or actually the cell leader and one of the other girls lives at the house, the center. And so, yeah, they came up to me. I'm like, hi, Haley, how have you been? We haven't seen you at worship in a while. I was so shocked. I was literally shaking. I was just so freaked out by that. And I was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I've just been really busy. And they just kept kind of questioning me. And I just played it off like everything was fine. I've just been really busy and I'll be fine. I mainly just didn't want to make a scene in front of my boss and my coworkers and stuff. Cause it's a super quiet office. And like these 3 people just come and start talking to me and everyone's looking at me like, what the heck is happening? And so I just am like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll just talk to you guys later. And, they were like, oh, well, do you want to, we can wait for you for when you get off and we can talk about it. I was like, oh, no. I have a meeting with my mom after this and she's picking me up and I can't, that was a lie, but, I didn't want them to wait for me. Yeah. So when that happened, I was like, okay, I have to tell them I'm leaving. I can't just quietly leave or else they're going to keep like doing this. So, when I got home, I only messaged those 3 girls. I didn't message anyone else. And I just told them that, I can't do this. I'm leaving. And the creepiest thing about it is that I had recently changed my work schedule to work on a Tuesday. I'd never worked on Tuesdays. They didn't know I was going to work on a Tuesday. I told them I worked on Mondays, not Tuesdays. So I don't know how they knew I was there, even at that time, like on that day, like, I don't know how they knew that. I'm thinking either they were somehow watching me, stalking me, something, I don't know. Or maybe they came Monday. I was like, oh, she's not here Monday. Let's come back every day until she's here. I don't know. But that really was creepy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're probably right in thinking I am going to have to publicly explain why I'm not coming to the services anymore so that these interactions stop happening, especially because you're worried about jeopardizing your employment, which is important to you as a student, because as you explained before, like students don't have a lot of money. And so employment at that point is probably particularly important in terms of remaining independent financially at that time in your life. So you get a text message a little while later from one of these 3 people, and that's the text that says, hey girl, I've been thinking about you since we talked on Tuesday. I'm just curious what made you want to leave. And then in this text conversation you just kind of say like, oh, there's loads of other stuff going on. I'm just kind of busy. And they just don't seem to leave it alone. They keep coming back to you like, but why did you really leave? Like, why would you want to leave? And you do try to explain yourself. And then it was this particular response that stood out to me. I was just curious. I felt similarly and didn't know what to do about it. We were in the same class. And all, yet I didn't know that you were experiencing the same thing. What made you start questioning? So that is like kind of like, it's kind of creepy and quite manipulative, because it's like, oh, me too. Tell me all about it. Like, you're obviously like holding back. So if I approach it from like, oh yeah, I've been feeling that way too, then maybe you'll be honest about why you're leaving. So you come back and say, well, honestly, this is how I've been thinking and feeling. And then from that, this person then goes on to say, I understand how you feel because I felt the same thing. But then they send this long text message, and at the end of it, it says like, what happens when you're wrong? What happens when you leave this group and it's the wrong decision to make? And so they completely like 180 on what they're saying to you. They're like, oh yeah, I understand you. I feel the same way. I've been having like similar doubts. However, like, imagine if you actually leave and you never come back again and really bad things happen to you. Like, I don't.
Yes.
How do you, like, did you respond to that last message? They were all the pictures I got. So I didn't know if you just stopped responding at that point because you obviously weren't getting anywhere with being like, look, I'm just leaving.
Yeah, I just stopped because when she sent the message saying she felt similarly, I was cautious because I was like, maybe she's just saying that. But then again, I was like, but maybe she's really opening up to me, and like, maybe I could help her leave too, and we could like support each other and like still be friends somehow, That's what I was thinking. So I told her like how it was affecting me and just how it just murdered my mental health being a part of Shincheonji. It really just messes with you. And when she was like, oh, well, you can't blame Shincheonji for your problems. That made me so angry because I felt like she didn't even care. And
yeah, and you absolutely can blame Shincheonji for the way that you're thinking and feeling at that point.
Exactly.
And it's not fair for her to try and put that on you.
Right. It's like just more gaslighting happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly that's exactly what it is. So since you've left, have you spoken to your family, friends, boyfriend about the experience and what really happened? Have you spoken to anybody maybe professionally about it? What has your life been like since?
I've only talked to a few of my friends about it. Mainly friends who I have that also go to the same university as me, because I don't want them to be dragged into it also, because I know they're still recruiting on campus. And, I told my boyfriend about it, and that's it. I didn't tell my parents. I might tell them. I don't know. I feel like they would feel guilty for, letting me get part of this group, but I don't want them to feel that way because, I don't think it's their fault. It's just something that happened. It could really happen to anyone.
Yeah.
But when I told one of my friends is a Korean major, and she had met the Shincheonji people. They had reached out to her. She met the Tingjangnim on this app where Korean people go on this app to kind of connect with people who want to learn Korean, and they kind of like help them and teach them. And she was using that. And so that's how she met the Tingjangnim. And the Tingjangnim wanted me to evangelize her. And I said no, because I tried kind of, but I didn't try that hard. But she was, my friend was actually kind of close to the Tingjangnim, and she had no idea she was a part of Shincheonji. And so we kept talking, and there was two other ladies who are like leaders in the center, at the Shincheonji Center, who were also close to her, who she had no idea had any relation to the Tingjangnim or Shincheonji at all. And so, I told her all of this and she was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I even found another girl who left the campus like a year and a half ago who had also been reached out to. And, we compared phone numbers and like we had, the same people, the same Shincheonji people, and she had no idea it was Shincheonji either. So it's like these people are really getting to everyone on campus. So I'm way more open with telling my friends on campus about it.
So you have been able to kind of let go of some of that anxiety that comes with speaking about Shincheonji through the kind of secrecy that they encourage when you're a part of it. And that's great that you've got a support network and a group of people that can listen to you about those experiences, and fantastic that you're speaking out about them as well, because they are so secretive. How are we ever supposed to learn about them if people don't come forward and have conversations with their peer group and have conversations on Reddit and come forward on platforms such as this one and say, like, if you get approached by somebody evangelizing who invites you to a Bible study group, it might actually end up, 12 months down the line that they reveal they are a group that have very, very particular methods of secrecy and manipulation. So yeah, it's very good that you're coming forward, but fantastic that you have people who will speak to you as well now that you are opening up to people and having those conversations. And the experience is obviously very fresh. You mentioned that you've only been away from them for a couple of months. I'm sure navigating this reintegration into typical everyday life that doesn't include 10 plus hours a week dedicated to Shincheonji will be, for a few months more, very, very strange experience for you. And if anybody ever does evangelize to you on the street, there could be some anxiety attached to those types of experiences. So I'm sure Shincheonji will always have a level of influence over your life, even if it becomes very minimal. But of course, one of the tragedies about these types of experiences is no matter how long or short your involvement with a group, some of that does stay with you for the rest of your life. So again, coming forward and talking about these groups and how to identify them and potentially saving one or two other people from becoming involved in with these particular groups is not to be taken lightly. So I think that's everything today, Hayley, unless there's anything you wanted to mention particularly that you think we've missed.
I think one thing that I wanted to mention is, how Shincheonji really, or at least, in the beginning, they really focus on having these leaves to become your best friend and so close to you.
Yeah.
And so I think that makes it really hard to leave, because these people are really close to you and like you love them, like they're your family and they're your friends. And it was really hard for me, because when I left, a lot of the people, actually pretty much all the people that I felt the closest to, didn't say anything at all to me. They didn't reach out. They, even after I made it clear that I was leaving, they didn't say anything. And like, our whole thing is that, if you're in Shincheonji, you're going to live forever and, you're amazing and all these things. And we can't let people leave because they're going to die. They're going to spiritually die. And like, we don't want that. And so it's like, with their mindset, why would you want to let your friend die? Like, the way they see it is, I'm like killing my spirit right now by leaving. So they're supposed to try to help me not do that. And when they didn't do that, that made me see like they really weren't my friends.
No, yeah. And that's unfortunate, when you build these close bonds and you feel so close to these people and you have these relationships, and then you realize that love is conditional, and real friends, real family, people that really care for you, obviously that love should not come with any conditions. It should be unconditional. And just because you've decided not to go to Shincheonji services anymore, or believe the same biblical text that they do, or the same prophecies that they do, it doesn't mean that they should care for you any less. You're still a human being with thoughts and feelings and emotions and individuality.
Right.
That, of course, that must be upsetting when you realize that, oh, I'm only worth something to you when I dedicate myself to SCJ, and then when I decide to renounce my faith with SCJ, you no longer care for me.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like when somebody says like, oh, I vote this way, and then someone says, well, I vote that way, so now we can't, like, if you don't conform with my thoughts, my feelings, and the way that I believe, then we can't be friends. And it's weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's very, we've covered SCJ a lot on this show, and it seems like we've covered it so much for how small the movement is in comparison to some of the other subjects that we talk about on the show. We do a lot of things like the troubled teen industry. There's a lot of coverage on that, because there are so many different wilderness programs and therapeutic boarding schools that we try and gain perspective across the entire spectrum. But the reason that I keep coming back to SCJ is because they do have these really coercive tools of manipulation, and the more we speak about it, I think the more we gain perspective on the types of tools that could be used and adopted by other groups, or that SCJ have adopted from other groups. And I think it's important to continue gaining those perspectives across the spectrum here, especially with your perspective as opposed to the others that we have from the male point of view. So that's been really important today. And I really appreciate you coming on here and speaking with us and giving us your story, even though it's been such a short amount of time since you've been out of Shincheonji. So thank you so much, Hayley, for your time today, for coming forward and for bringing awareness to this particular topic.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you letting me talk about it. And I really just appreciate what you're doing, because I know it's probably helped a lot of people, and it's definitely helped me realize that I'm not, dumb. Like, I'm not, there's not something wrong with me. Like, this is a real problem. And like, we don't think about it because we think of cults and we just think of Jonestown and, and all those like big things that happen, but we don't realize that those things still happen and they're still dangerous. And so what you're doing is really important, and it's really helped me a lot. So thank you.
It's absolutely a privilege, and I just appreciate your time today, Hayley. So I'll be in touch when the episode goes live, but for now, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Take care, Hayley. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I am your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.